Well, good morning and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, the Tennessee's New Population Estimates Program. MTAS is happy to host this webinar conducted by the Tennessee State Data Center at the UT Boyd Center for Business and Economic Research and the Tennessee Comptroller's Office of Local Government. So just a couple of logistical notes for this morning. We are recording, and we will share the recording after the meeting, as well as the PDFs of the presentations. The chat will be disabled for the meeting. However, we will be using Zoom's Q&A feature to take questions and provide answers. You can access and open the Q&A feature from the Zoom navigation bar at the bottom of your screen. We are planning to address questions at the end of the webinar, depending on the time that we have available. If there are questions that we cannot get answered during the webinar, someone will follow up with you after the webinar to answer your question. So, without further ado, I will turn over the mic to Tim Kuhn, Director of the Tennessee State Data Center, to get us started.
Okay.
Tim?
Thank you, Francis, and thank you to everyone that's joining us this morning. We have a great turnout for this topic, preparing for Tennessee's new population estimates program. And our goal today is to make sure that you're aware of the program and what it means for your community. But two, there's a couple of practical things you can do to make sure that the information that's used in producing population estimates is as accurate as possible. So with that, we'll get into. There we go. We're going to start with an overview of a certified population report, where this information gets reported to, and how that relates to the state shared revenue programs. So the state of Tennessee has for a long time produced a certified population report. That information is shared by the Department of Economic and Community Development each July. And up until this point, that information inside that report was based on population from the last decennial census, and then also any 2020 census challenges of the decennial census, and a special thanks to MTAS for their work in helping us to conduct many of those challenges. And then it also contained information about any communities in the state of Tennessee that had conducted a special census that had been certified by the Department of Economic and Community Development. So for the most part, that baseline information from the decennial census is what was used for distributing state shared revenues to communities in the state. Each year, a new report is published, and those counts become effective on July 1. For the most part, much of that is going to remain the same. There will still be a certified population report, and that information will still be published on July 1. The content inside that report is what's going to be changing. As far as how that information relates to the state shared revenues, when revenues are shared with communities, there is often a formula for doing that. And the population that's inside the certified population report is the basis for sharing those revenues. I've got this slide split up into municipalities into counties, municipalities on the left side, counties on the right. This just gives you an idea of how population factors into sharing revenues. So let's just start with the big one that everyone's aware of, sales and use tax. 100% of the portion of revenues shared with municipalities is based on population. So it's essentially a per capita distribution of that revenue, entirely based on population. For counties, things are a little bit more complex. There's a little bit more variety to these formulas, a little bit less reliance on population, but you can see, in the case of something like a gasoline tax, 25% of those revenues are distributed just on the basis of population, with other factors being used to distribute the balance. Okay, so now we're going to give you just an overview of the population estimate legislation, and really, to a degree, kind of population estimates in general, so you're aware of what the change is. This population estimates law was introduced in this last spring. It was signed into law on May 21st by Governor Lee, and it becomes effective on January 1st, 2026. In essence, what it does is it asks us here at the Boyd Center through the Tennessee State Data Center to produce population estimates for the state of Tennessee, And then it requires that the Department of Economic and Community Development certify those populations and report them in the Certified Population Report, thus becoming the basis for revenue distribution. The first certified population report that will contain those estimates will be published on July 1st, 2026. So in essence, this becomes effective next July. So what does this mean? What does the new law mean with respect to the distribution of formulas, the distribution of these revenue formulas and the population that's used? So the new law says that the allocation and distribution of monies to counties and municipalities must be made according to the revised population certified by the Department of Economic and Community Development. So in essence, what it's saying is anytime that population is used in one of these formulas, rather than using the decennial census and special censuses, it will be using population estimates. Now, we do want to be clear that the legislation goes on to say that you still retain the right to conduct a special census. There's a special census that's ongoing now. There's special censuses that have been conducted already this decade, but you can still do one. And in many cases, this will kind of replace the need to do that, but that right is preserved in the legislation. The next thing I want to let you know about is that what year the population estimates will represent. So the way to maybe best explain this is to start kind of by going backwards. Well, actually going forward. Let's go forward to 2031, to the start of the next decade. And what the legislation says is that we'll use population estimates. I already said that part to you. But in a year when there is a decennial census, we're going to use those. So in 2031, there'll be a certified population report that is released in July 1, 2031, and it will contain results of the decennial census. So that means that on July 1st, 2031, we'll be reporting population for April 1st, 2030. So in essence, just understand that these population estimates lag by 1 year. So we'll always be reporting the prior year's population. So that means that in 2026, July 1, 2026, we'll be reporting population on July 1, 2025. Okay, so next we're going to go into our plans for the first population estimate product that will be released maybe late May, early June, before July 1, though. That's the key thing to understand. So let's start by explaining what a population estimate is and how it's different from what we had before. When you think about a decennial census, you're thinking about, think of an actual head count of the population. Each person is actually counted via a form, where if someone responds in a household, that information is sent back into the Census Bureau, or maybe a Census Bureau going to the door and knocking on it if that person didn't respond. A population estimate differs in that it is not a head count. It is based on that. It is based on that base kind of population information that gets collected at the beginning of each decade. But after that, it is a statistical calculation that's made to estimate the number of residents in each community. And it is not based on a head count. It is based on things like surveys, statistical models to a degree, and a large amount of it is based on administrative records. So that is information that is collected in the course of conducting kind of other kinds of government business. We'll talk a lot about building permits later in this presentation, but it could also be things like tax returns, birth records, death records, and a whole sort of information that governments collect as part of their standard business. All right, for the information that we will publish on in the July 1, 2026 Certified Population Report that will be certified by the Department of Economic and Community Development will contain information that is largely based on the vintage 2025 population estimates that's produced by the U.S. Census Bureau. Now, there's a couple of reasons why we're going in this direction in our first year. The first is that we want to maximize the amount of time that you have to prepare for the numbers, to see what they're going to look like. And we think that this is probably the best way to do that. This also gives us time to operationalize this program, put all the pieces in place that we need to be able to share data back with the state and for them to be able to ingest and consume that information. It also gives you a chance to look at vintage 2024 population estimates, see how those look for your community, see how the trends look. And so in other words, we don't want you to feel surprised when this information comes out. We've got some dashboards and other information that can help you look at that. And we'll show you how to do those later in this presentation. The other reason is that we've already been working with the Census Bureau throughout the decade on the population estimates. So there's a couple of ways that we've been doing that. The first is working with MTAS. We conducted a number of challenges to the 2020 decennial census results. I think in total there were 13 communities in the state that did that. We also work as a liaison for the state of Tennessee on behalf of the state of Tennessee to the Federal State Cooperative for Population Estimates. In that role, we work to supply information about the state to the Census Bureau, and that includes things like group quarter population, that's number of people living inside dormitories, prisons, jails, and nursing homes across the state. And we also work with communities to submit corrections to the building permit survey that are the basis for municipal population estimates. And we'll be talking more about that here in a few minutes. The data that comes out of the Census Bureau, this will be released beginning hopefully mid-December. We'll see if that schedule holds based on how the federal government gets reopened. But it's released on a flow basis, so it begins starting in mid-December, and it's released on a top-down approach where information about larger geographies is released first, and then over time, more detailed information gets released all the way up through mid-May when we get sub-county populations, which is when the municipal population estimates come out. So in mid-December, we'll get information about this later if this production schedule holds. We'll get information about the nation and the state. So that'll be the state of Tennessee's total population number. In mid-March, we will get information about counties. And all these things add up. So the sum of the counties adds up to the state of Tennessee total. Then in mid-May, we'll get information about municipal and unincorporated parts of counties. Again, these sum up to the county totals. So that's the schedule for releasing that information. The next thing I want to do is just kind of give you some information about the data that goes into producing these estimates so that you can kind of see where the information that you as a municipality have or you as a county might have that could help improve the estimates. The first is, let's start with the county population model. Let's start with the base population. This is for all practical purposes, this is the decennial census. This is the 2020 census result. And then on an annual basis, we add the number of births and subtract the number of deaths. This is called natural change. If there's more births than deaths, the population increases. We add to that net international migration and net domestic migration. Together, those form a net migration component, and that becomes a new population for a year. Then we kind of cycle back through the beginning and run this 4 or 5 times in order to get to the current population for the county. At the municipal level, we start with the average number of people. First thing we have to do is determine how many people live in households. And we do that by taking from the 2020 census the average number of people that live in a housing unit, and we multiply that by the current number of housing units. That gives us the household population. We add to that people that are residents in dormitories, nursing homes, prisons, and jails. And that gives us a municipal population. Same sort of thing. This is cyclical. We go through it a few times to get to the current population. Now, one point about municipal populations, and that is that the household populations for the municipalities have to sum to the county's household population totals. So oftentimes when this process is run, it will produce populations that are not equal to the county totals. In fact, it'll never be equal to the county totals. So they are all raked down or up as needed to make them fit to the control total, which is the county's total population. So that is an adjustment that has to be made at the municipal level. The last point I want to make relating to the formula sort of side of this is it relates to the housing unit components of change, which are a key factor in deriving the population estimate for municipalities. So the housing stock in a community is not static, it is changing. And the population estimates formula for municipalities takes that into account. So same sort of thing. We start with the decennial census population count of housing units. We add to that the net unit additions. The net unit additions are essentially comprised of the number of building permits. So this is the number of units authorized by permit, the number of mobile homes that are placed, and then we subtract demolitions. On an annual basis, that equals the number of new housing units, and we cycle through this process to get to the current number of housing units. Then the number of housing units is what drives the municipal population. Not everyone issues building permits, though. There are, especially in some unincorporated parts of counties, there are building permits are not used, but there is another process by which information about non-permitted housing unit additions are added. So if you represented a community like that, you can work with us and we'll help you get those straightened out too. Okay, before we starting to talk about what you can do to improve your data, there's just a couple of last things that I want to clarify relating to our use of the Census Bureau numbers. The first is we're going to release these numbers on July 1, 2026. We already stated that we intend to use the vintage 2025 population estimates from the Census Bureau, but there are some things that we have to do to make adjustments for those estimates comport with both the legislation and the practices here in Tennessee. So the first is that because the right to preserve a special census is retained in the new legislation, we have to work to integrate special censuses into the population estimates. Now, there's one community in the state of Tennessee that's utilized the Census Bureau to do that. Their estimates will be included in that. There's a second one that's ongoing with the special census. It will not be done in time in order for those estimates to be reflected. And there's other special censuses that have been conducted by municipalities that have been certified by the Department of Economic and Community Development that need to be potentially integrated into this model as well. So we'll be using a process to get those weaved in. The second is that there's some metropolitan counties for which population estimates can't be used directly. This is Davidson County, Moore County, and Trousdale County. And in this instance, the balance of the county, the portion that is the basis for the distribution of state share revenues is not the whole county. It is just the portion that's within the urban services district where urban style services are provided. So we have to derive a population estimate for those. And then finally, we have to adjust the aggregate population to reflect all these things. So the sum of the municipal populations is that aggregate is an important part of distributing state share revenues. We'll show you that formula here in a minute. But that final adjustment has to be made before we can share, before you and the Department of Revenue will be able to make the calculation of the total state shares. Okay. So that's kind of an introduction to the population estimates legislation. So now we want to transition into what you can do to get ready for implementation. And one of the first things that you can do is to make sure that your boundaries are correct. And I'm going to turn it over to Ned Phillips, who's with the Division of Property Assessments in the Office of Local Government at the Comptroller, and let him talk to you about the Boundary and Annexation Survey Program. Ned?
Thank you, Tim. Let me go ahead and get my slide shared here. Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to talk about a little bit about our city limits and the BAS. First off, who we are. I am Ned Phillips. I work for the Comptroller Treasury Division of Property Assessments Geographic Services section, formerly Office of Local Government. We are led by Jason Mumpower, and our mission is to make government work better. Okay, let's talk about mapping your boundaries and kind of build on what Tim talked about the numbers and things. Okay, I'd like to talk about your boundaries and how accurate mapping of them affects many things in and out of your county. Okay, so what is the BAS? The Boundary and Annexation Survey, or BAS, is the primary way that local, county, and tribal governments ensure that their legal boundaries and consequently their official population counts are correctly recorded with the federal government. Every year, governments use the BAS to update their legal boundaries and official names. In the past, census would send paper maps to the municipalities for verification. This still happens to some extent. But due to technology moving on and increased availability of GIS for smaller areas and the open source program GUPS that the census use, entities can now submit data electronically to the census, or in our case, a partnership state, to the state. Okay, in the BAS, governments report official name changes, incorporations, disincorporations, annexations, and de-annexations. Governments can also update boundaries, features, and landmarks for the following: incorporated cities, towns, boroughs, and villages, basically incorporated places. Townships and towns, any minor civil divisions. Counties or county equivalents, and we do occasionally have county boundary changes. Consolidated cities, and also roads and other linear features. Now, this is important because the census uses roads to delineate some of its census block boundaries. Okay, let's talk about Tennessee and the BAS. And this is a little timeline on how we kind of got to where we currently are. In 2010, the Local Planning Assistance Office was dissolved. And the Local Planning Assistance Office had contracted with a lot of cities and counties, and they kind of did all the heavy lifting as far as sending annexations or de-annexations to the census for the BAS. This was lost when they went away. In 2012, after feedback from the 2010 census, it showed that we needed a little bit more accurate corporate boundaries reflected in the census data. So in 2014, the census suspended the BAS due to budget issues. And this allowed a little bit more of a boundaries to be kind of looked at and verified and updated by OLG. In 2016, the Tennessee Comptroller's Office becomes the lead agency in the development of the BAS Partnership Agreement. In 2017, the Office of Local Government, now Geographic Services, acts as the liaison for the 2017 BAS, and all annexations or de-annexations submitted to us are reflected in the data sent to the Census Bureau in support of the BAS program. Okay, we talked about partnership agreements. Right here is where it stands. I think Georgia has been added, but they allow their municipalities to do their own self-reporting. But here you have the states that work with the BAS and send in the annexations and de-annexations and any changes for the cities. Now, this really helps because it kind of takes a lot of the work off the census so they can focus on other areas. And it kind of lets us as an agency get to know, our cities and work with them to make sure, the data being sent is correct. Just basically helps everyone out. The BAS survey includes approximately 40,000 entities and is conducted every year to provide the geographic support needed for the American Community Survey. The number of entities included in the BAS in a particular year may vary depending on the funding and needs of the Census Bureau in fulfilling the requirements for its censuses and surveys. The purpose of the BAS state agreements is to coordinate the sharing of information and resources between the U.S. Census Bureau and the state governments in collecting boundary information for selected legally defined geographic areas. Through this partnership with the state governments, the Census Bureau aims to reduce the duplication of efforts among the various levels of government and cost burden associated with the annual BAS. And like I said, Tennessee is a partnership, and every municipality in Tennessee is highly encouraged every year, all through the year, to send us any changes that they have in their boundaries. Okay, when does the BAS occur? In December each year, all government units are given an opportunity to participate in the next year's BAS. All changes reflect the previous calendar year. The Census Bureau has conducted the BAS annually since 1971, with cancellations in 93 and 2014. The majority of boundary-related processing activities occur from January through August. As you can see from this graphic, the earlier a city's data is received, the more programs it benefits. And the two dates to really pay attention to is March 1st and May 31st. May 31st is the final deadline to get any changes to us, so they will reflect, in the next year's census geographic data. Here are some of the most important elements that the BAS looks to capture. Annexations comprise the majority of the changes, but de-annexations, occasionally occur. The last incorporation in Tennessee was in 1998 by the town of Three-Way in Madison County, and the last disincorporation was in 2010 by the Iron City in Lawrence County. Also, each municipality is required to report any changes to certain state agencies. And we see here, the highest receiving authority for most of these, is Comptroller of the Treasury, Geographic Services, but also you have a few things that goes to the Secretary of State. Okay, I've talked about the specifics of it, but what's in it for a city to make sure that this happens? How does the BAS basically benefit you? Okay, legal boundaries determine your government's population count every year in the annual community survey and the population estimates program. Many government agencies and other groups use population counts to determine the allocations of funds. Responding to the BAS ensures that your local government has the best data available for its decision-making process, and it receives all the funds for which it's entitled. Basically, just a lot of decision-making, on different things and areas and funding. Boundary records are publicly available and used by many other federal agencies, researchers, and the public. Because the U.S. Census Bureau is responsible for tracking America's legal boundaries and population data, geographic updates that you provide to us ripple out in numerous important ways. Okay, so how do I review my boundary? There's two ways to review your city limits. If you have a GIS shop or a tech-savvy person, you can always download the BAS partnership shapefiles, from the following link. And there's also a BAS website page there with it that, kind of steps you through the whole process. But since Tennessee's the liaison state, most of that reporting, is not applicable. Now, here's our favorite method. You can visit our city limits dashboard at this following link, and this is a reflection of the current redistricting city limits data. As Tennessee's liaison for municipal boundaries, our office will ensure that your boundaries shown on this dashboard that are submitted, any corrections are submitted to the Census Bureau. Okay, here's what the dashboard looks like. You can filter by city and then change type. When you do that, you can see the changes we have, the acres annexed or de-annexed. If you see that your municipal boundary is incorrect or missing any annexations or de-annexations, you can submit the appropriate documentation to our office via the dashboard or at cities@cot.tn.gov. Once again, as the liaison, we will make sure that your changes get sent to the census. Okay, here's a short video of the dashboard in action. You can filter by city. filter by change type. Click on a particular change. It brings up a little bit more information over in the box. And you also have a link to provide documentation or request a map. And it shows us who it's coming from. So basically, that's just a quick and easy way to look over your limits and send us any changes to us. Okay, for the fastest delivery and response, please email documents to the following address: cities@co10.tn.gov. This is the best route when time is crucial. Now, it's not the recommended course of action, but you can physically mail documents to the following address. And this will reach myself here in my Knoxville office. We don't disencourage any way to send it to us. I mean, even if it's carrier pigeon, we want to get the changes so we can take care of our cities. Okay, if you have any further questions, I know I went through this really quick, but if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to myself or anyone on our team. And here's our contact information. Okay, with that, that is the end of my presentation.
Thanks, Ned.
And just a reminder, we will be sending out PDFs of these presentations. There's a lot of good information in here, and the contact information. We want to make sure you get that.
And also a reminder that if you have any questions for me or for Ned, and we'll have some other people available later on too, drop those questions into the Q&A inside the Zoom window, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. Okay, so again, thanks, Ned, for that information on the BAS. It is very important that your boundaries are correct. Fixing them on the front end is way easier than fixing them on the back end. So if you can get those right, that's important. It is the number of housing units. It's for the basis for the housing unit estimates are literally recompiled every year based on the 2020 decennial census information. So the boundaries are applied over the top of all the housing units that were in the 2020 census. And if there's changes, those changes get reflected. So it's an incredibly important piece of information to have correct on the front end. That's the first thing, that kind of the first practical thing you should do. The second practical thing you should do is just know what your current population is and see what it's showing in the vintage 2024 population estimates, so you can give an idea where it might head in the vintage 2025 ones. So I wanted to start by showing you a real quick way to look at the county population. This is our dashboard of county populations. To view your county here in Knox County, we would just click Knox. This dashboard will show our current population, 506,000 here in Knox County, the trend over time, the changes, information about why population is changing through the components of population change that we talked about in that kind of that formula for the county county estimates, and finally a tab that will let you see some of the fastest growing counties in the state. So that's how you view the county information. Our municipal dashboard is set up to allow you to do a similar sort of thing. You just type in the name of the municipality where you want to view. Click on that municipality. You'll be able to see the total population, the population change, the percentage change, and then some higher level statistics about the state's municipalities. So those are our two dashboards that can be used to give yourself an idea of where things stand for you right now. All right, number 3 is practically you should probably start to think about what the change means for your town in terms of the total aggregate, the proportion of population that is in your community relative to all of the municipalities in the state as a whole. So this isn't as applicable on the county side, but on the city side, this may be something you want to think about. Populations are distributed in the proportion as the population of each municipality bears to the aggregate population for all municipalities within the state. So the way you might be able to use that to get some idea where this is, how this might work for you, is to look at, we're going to use Anytown, USA in 2024, Anytown, Tennessee in 2024, and let's just say that its population was 1,000 people, and the aggregate population of all the municipalities in the state of Tennessee was 100,000 people. So if we take 1,000 and divide it by the aggregate population, 100,000, Anytown, Tennessee's population proportion is 0.010. Now let's go forward a year to 2025 and say that Anytown, Tennessee had a population increase of 500 people. That increases its population to 1,500 people. We're just assuming that no other communities in the state of Tennessee had any population change, highly unlikely. But for this example, that increases the aggregate municipal population to 100,500 people. So if you do this calculation again, it's 1,500 people divided by 100,500 people. The population proportion for any town is now 0.015. That is a 50% increase in Anytown, Tennessee's population proportion from 2024 to 2025. That might be kind of a way that you can use this to start to get a handle on what it means in terms of population proportion. Of course, the other side of the coin is that the state share revenues will likely be increasing as well. So there's going to be several pieces that you'll have to take into consideration. Your population is changing, the aggregate population of the state's municipalities is changing, and so is the revenues that the state is sharing with municipalities and counties. Okay, the balance of the time here for about the next little less than 10 minutes, hopefully, we'll be talking about something called housing unit review. This is a way that you can improve the information that's been reported through the U.S. Census Bureau's building permit survey. And this is kind of our fourth kind of practical thing that you can do to prepare yourself for the population estimates. So let's start by reviewing and just remembering that on the sub-county side, for the municipalities and for the unincorporated parts of counties, that building permits are one of the key factors for determining the current population. So it's the number of housing units in 2020 plus all the building permits that have been issued since. The way that information is collected is through the U.S. Census Bureau's building permit survey. This is information that is collected from building chiefs. So there's approximately 324 communities in the state of Tennessee that receive this survey on a monthly or annual basis. It goes to the building chief. The building chief is supposed to provide information about the number of new units, the value of those units, and in some cases, information about the number of buildings when there's multi-dwelling structures that have been permitted. So of the 324 communities that were invited to participate, not everyone responded either completely or didn't respond at all. So only 2/3 of communities have 12 months of building permit survey activity that was reported in 2024. Tennessee is, we're better than a lot of other states, and we're actually seeing improvements, I think, in part due to the housing unit review process that we've been pushing. We currently sit 20th in terms of the kind of our response rate. We think we can do better there. So hopefully through this process, we'll see improved reporting of responses to the building permit survey. So what happens if your community does not respond to the building permit survey? If your community doesn't respond to the building permit survey, I think actually let's start by saying this. The number of building permits that are issued is an important economic indicator for the United States as a whole. It's an important economic indicator for the state of Tennessee. So if a community does not respond, there needs to be a process to neutralize non-response in the survey that comes out on a monthly basis. So The Census Bureau estimates the response for the community. And if you don't respond, it bases that on prior years of building permit activity in your community and kind of the larger trend in the Southeast United States. And in our particular case, it's Kentucky, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. That's kind of the basis for the trend. So it's not data about your community. It's data from other communities that becomes a basis for your estimate of the number of building permits. In many cases, that information is not correct. So the Tennessee State Data Center operates a program on behalf, kind of in our role as the liaison to the Federal State Cooperative for Population Estimates, where communities are invited to review the number of housing units that's reported in the building permit survey, to check if there, especially if there has been no response or a partial response, and to submit new data. So every community in the state of Tennessee will be invited to review the information that's in the building permit survey. We'll show you how to just kind of take a look and see what it looks like through a dashboard. But we prioritize review for a couple of different types of communities. One is the communities for which we have incomplete data. If we don't have a response from you that we can see inside the building permit survey data that's published by the Census Bureau, we likely have you on a list of priority communities that we'll show you how to access here in a minute. And I would investigate maybe submitting new information to us for incomplete years. But there's also a couple of other situations where it's also important that you look. The first is if you're a municipality that spans a county line. So if the county line crosses through your municipality, the building permit survey does not have enough detail to say which county that permit was issued in. We only know that it was issued for a municipality, but we don't know which county. So they get kind of allocated automatically. We can fix that if you were in that situation. The second type of permit office that would probably want to look at this, or a second type of municipality or county office, is one where there's a regional issue in your building permits. So if you're the agency that issues your building permits issues permits for other municipalities, or if you have a county office that covers some municipalities, you may want to go in and look more closely at this data so that you can submit new data to us, showing the actual municipality where this occurred. So those are the other two instances. Overall, incomplete data or situations where the building permit survey lacks sufficient detail is when you want to send us this information. So how do you know if you need to participate in a housing unit review? The first is we have a list of communities that we would like to reach out to. This is available through our website, and this slide will have the link. It will show you instances where communities didn't report, and that is what's called the number of imputed permits. Then we also have lists of instances where we have regional permit offices in multi-county jurisdictions. The second thing that you may want to do is use our dashboard, our building permit survey imputation dashboard, which lets you look and see if activity has been reported for your community. So you start to do this, you start by looking at the county where your municipality is at, then click on the municipality itself. And we can look at the number of permits that were reported and imputed in this dashboard. And what you'll see in this case, we have good reporting from the city of Knoxville. The blue bars and the gray bars are the same length. That basically means that the number of reported and the number of estimated units is about the same. There's one year in 2023 where there was a slight estimate. In some cases, you'll see this blue bar is gone. It's not even present, and that's years when a community did not participate. The third thing to do is to have a talk with your building chief and just make sure that they understand now that it's not just about an economic indicator for the nation. It really is an important part of estimating the population for a municipality. So to improve future outcomes, just make sure that if they see that building permit survey, that they respond to it. If you have trouble determining who's receiving the building permit survey, let us know. We can maybe help you find out who that person is. So if you determine that you are one of these three types of communities and you want to participate in the housing unit review, you can submit data to us covering the period from 2019 to 2024. And there's three types of permits that you can submit. The first is new single and multi-dwelling units. So this is kind of your standard building permit. The second you can report is the number of mobile home placements inside your community. The third is to report and correct the number of demolitions. So this information is automatically derived from other sources, but you can provide actual information to override the number of mobile home placements and demolitions in your community. So three types of data that can be submitted. The types of data that you can submit is in two forms. One, you can give us aggregate data, which just is which is a reporting on an annual basis. We'll have to work with you a little bit on this one. It needs to be coming from published reports or from websites or other places that is kind of like publicly available. So this is probably not as preferred as the record level list, where you take information directly out of your building permit system, put it into an Excel sheet, a CSV file, or something along those lines with, at a minimum, this information: the date of the permit, the address of the permit, the county where that permit is. So that's especially important on those multi-county jurisdictions. The type of improvements, so the type of unit, for instance. Improvement types, we want to see that these are new units and not an addition. And then the number of units. So this is not the number of buildings in the case of a multi-county. We want to be, in the case of a multi-dwelling structure, we want to be looking at the number of units that were authorized. So it's fairly standard, and we can work with you on this. If you do decide that you want to participate, we'll do a little bit of back and forth and get this sorted out. It's not that big of a deal. If you want to participate in housing review again as an overview, there's no requirement on the data format. We'll work with you. The deadline for us to submit information is January 26th. We can usually turn it around pretty quick, but so the sooner you can get started on this and the sooner you can get this information into us, the better. We don't know about any extensions that would be granted by the Census Bureau because of the government shutdown. But when we find that out, we'll try to pass that along. You can visit this website, https://tiny.utk.edu/HUR. We have some very detailed information there, or you can just send us an email at tnsdc@utk.edu. So I'm just going to leave this contact information up here on the screen for 1 second. That's my direct email address if you want to reach out to me and you have any other questions. And now we also we have a Q&A scheduled right now too. So if you have any questions and you want to put those into the Q&A window here in Zoom, I see there's at least a couple.
There's one.
Here.
Yeah, actually, Tim, there's two from the same person. And I don't know if you can see the text. If you'd like, I can read it out. What do you prefer?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So Lee, this is from Lee Bissinger, Hamilton County. She said, we will email after this primarily on verification of our group quarter units, UTC and Southern Adventist, and to see if we have anyone making the initial submissions from the Land Development Office. As I noticed, we're at the top of the imputed counts. Also, adjusted counts that I send are not appearing on one of the dashboards. And they went on to say, can you send the name of the Chattanooga recipient of the BPS?
Yep. So that's from Lee at Chattanooga, Hamilton County. But we worked with Lee to get that information. Chattanooga is at the top of the list, I think, simply because I don't see reports going into the building permit survey. So this is one of those instances where having to talk with that building chief would help. but I think we've been working to try to get that information from Chattanooga for a couple of years. So we've kind of got that one resolved. But again, that's one of those where we can improve future outcomes by getting that data submitted. Some communities rely on something called the Survey of Construction, where the Census Bureau does this kind of collection of data for them. More accurate way is to make sure that information gets submitted monthly directly from the building chief. This related to the group quarter counts. That is kind of a separate process, and it affects county populations. And so we collect information from the universities directly. Not everyone responds, but we have been emphasizing the importance to those universities to get that information into us because of this change. And so next year we'll do that again, and if I think as part of that, we can ask the municipalities to encourage universities to provide that information. It is just a basic head count of students that live inside dormitories and other university-owned housing. So it is pretty basic information. It's nothing proprietary that's going to reveal anything. Are there some, and also I just want to say two other things. We've got other people available that can help on the call here. We have Ned, who you heard from the Office of Local Government. Matthew Hill is also joining from that group. And then also Cassie Stinson, who's from the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development and oversees the Certified Population Report, is also available to answer any questions. And Francis, were there some questions in the chat too?
No, Tim, because we don't have the chat enabled, so all of the questions would come into the Q&A.
I do see a few questions there.
You do? I don't see anything.
I have already said this, but will these presentation slides be sent to us? I believe that answer is yes.
Yes, that is the answer.
Okay. So, and I think that will happen pretty soon. I think it will happen as soon as we have the YouTube link available where you'll be able to watch this again.
Absolutely. And that will be on the MTAS YouTube account, and we'll send that link with the PDFs of the presentations. And those PDFs will have all of this contact information available.
The next question I see is there a list of communities that did not respond to the building permit survey? You can look at that through the dashboard to see if a community did or did not respond. In our priority communities list, which there's a link to in this presentation, we have kind of sorted those in terms of the ones where there is the most number of permits issued that either didn't respond or in a regional permit office or span county lines. So you'll see those three types in that priority communities list. It's shown on the link is shown in the slide, and so look for that information there. The next question is, I see my community on the priorities community list. From the dashboard, it appears that permits are being reported since 2021, and years 2019 and 2020 were imputed. Is that why we're on the list? Yes, that would be why you're on the list. The good news is that we can go all the way back to 2019 to correct that information. So permits issued beginning in January 1, 2019 through December 31st, 2019 show up in the 2020 population estimate for your community under the assumption that it takes at least 6 months for a housing unit to be built. That's kind of the implicit assumption with the way the Census Bureau's formula works. Does anyone else have any other questions for myself, Matthew, Cassie, or Ned?
I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A. I guess that, and Tim, if you're not seeing anything directly in chat, So indeed, people can send you messages
Oh, there was,
directly.
okay, that's how that worked. I see. Yeah, I did have a few direct,
Yes,
okay.
learning as we go,
Yeah.
as always. Well, shall we go ahead and wrap up? If you think we've gotten all the questions we're going to get. Well, again, thank you all for joining us. The recording of the webinar will be posted on the MTAS YouTube account, and we will send the PDF and the link and the PDFs to everyone who has signed up. If you have any questions after the webinar, feel free to contact Tim, and he will get you routed to the right person or to Ned Phillips. And again, thank you for being here. Enjoy the rest of your Monday.
Thank you, Francis.
Thank you.